We're operating in 235 East 42. We have columns partially down on 21 and 22, and we have floors sagging between 21 and 26.
On July 7, 2026, crowds gathered outside 235 East 42nd Street.
A building is on the verge of collapsing in Midtown Manhattan.
Bricks falling from a former office building that is being converted into luxury rental units.
While at the time, its developer described the issues as nothing more than a typical construction mishap, how often do emergency services close an entire area for routine purposes?
This is far from a typical construction accident.
The north side of that building is crumbling. The I-beams are bending like cigarettes in there.
The building remains unstable. Since arriving on scene, we have witnessed additional movement in one of the compromised columns.
Though investigations are still ongoing, now 2 months down the line, we can look at some clues as to what the hell happened here and try and unpack a little bit of how one of New York's biggest building projects got into such a state.
If you live in a major city, then you've probably seen police tape before. But what you may not have seen is a cordon being enforced because authorities were worried that a building might collapse. And that is exactly what happened here just a few weeks ago.
Situated not far from Grand Central Terminal, 235 East 42nd Street sits among a cluster of offices. Opening in 1961 as the Pfizer headquarters, it spent the majority of its life going pretty under the radar. The building was 33 stories tall, more than 3 times as tall as its neighbour. Joined at its hip is 219 East 42nd Street, a much shorter development that opened in the early 20th century, standing just 10 stories tall. These buildings opened in a different time, in eras defined by a drive for office space, when the term work from home would have been gibberish to most people. The landscape today is very different. The office is still important to the city, but following the pandemic, vacancy rates shot up. Meanwhile, as any resident of New York or regular viewer of the B1M is aware, the city is in the midst of a housing crisis. With so many empty or partially empty office buildings and a lot of people needing homes, you might start to see a solution. New York certainly did. In 2024, the City of Yes for Housing Opportunity was rubber-stamped, relaxing rules around converting offices into residential spaces. Enter 235 East 42nd Street, which I'm going to refer to going forward as simply 235. By 2025, construction was underway on what architect Gensler described as the largest conversion of its kind in New York City history. Once open, it'll offer more than 1,600 apartments.
Now, this is where things get challenging. The smaller tower here is 219 East 42nd, and that's being taken up to 29 or 30 stories, depending on how you count things like mechanical floors. Meanwhile, over here, the bigger tower is 235 East 42nd, and that's having 4 stories added, taking up to 37 stories overall. Basically, these 2 towers were both constructed half a century apart, but they're now being merged into one giant development.
To put that into perspective, in the time between 219 and 235 being built, America fought in 2 world wars, stumbled through the Great Depression, and fundamentally overhauled its building processes.
Now, looking back, it's easy to see how much things have changed between the early 1900s and the 1960s. But in the moment, it's hard to recognize the speed at which everything around us is evolving. Today, a lot of the buildings across New York are designed for people like me, who need a desk, a computer, and a healthy supply of coffee to get our work done.
Hey, does anybody want coffee?
And at this rate, I spend so much of my time in my office that I'm wondering whether I should just live here. I can start by getting rid of this desk and replacing it with a Super King, but given how hot this summer has been, I'll be keeping the aircon. Okay, it's a bit more complicated than that, but visualizing the move is much more straightforward with Rayon Design. It's a browser-based design tool which tells you something about how much technology has evolved since the 60s, making any architect or designer's creation process an absolute doddle. No install,
no version wrangling, just open a tab and start drawing. You can quickly piece together your blueprints, like my perfect bedroom, adding as much detail as you need thanks to Rayon's massive CAD library. It's stacked out with a whopping 50,000 blocks, and if for some bizarre reason you can't find what you're looking for, their AI tool can generate basically anything you want at the drop of a hat. And all of this integrated into one place, from concept through design and even presentation, which saves you from constantly clicking between different programs searching for information. If you think you can convert this office into a better home, or you want to make the most of Rayon Design for your next project, then scan the QR code on screen or click the link below to get started for free today. Now, let's get back to Manhattan, because there's an office conversion there that kind of needs our attention. You see, the smaller 219 was built in the early 1900s with terracotta and cast iron. Meanwhile, the taller 235 is a largely steel structure using material nearly half as strong as some of the stuff you can get your hands on today. And so, modernising and redeveloping those two buildings calls for very different approaches.
Steel for the 1960s is very, very, very different, believe it or not, from steelwork from 2026.
Chris O'Regan is a chartered structural engineer and the head of structural safety at Frankham Consultancy Group. While he's not part of the redevelopment at 235, we dropped him a call the week after it hit the news to ask him what he thought.
The first thing you do is find out what the structural performance, almost reverse engineer the structure entirely, determine what it can actually support. Then if there is any need for strengthening works, then you design them, apply them and develop them and work them through.
So preparing these two buildings from different eras to become a single development of the future is one challenge. And we've already touched on the second hurdle.
Converting it from office space into residential space isn't easy. There are really strict regulations around natural light and ventilation in apartment buildings that are different to those regulations for office buildings. The plumbing will need an overhaul to serve the different residential units. There's the potential for the ceiling heights having to be varied and weight distributions differing between the floors. We're talking about adjusting support beams to manage loads and create entirely new spaces for completely new floor plans.
In fact, in 2023, Moody Analytics reviewed more than 1,000 offices in the city, and of those, only 3% were viable for apartment conversions. Now, we've actually covered an office to apartment conversion project in New York before. In 2023, the 1930s era 1 Wall Street reopened as a luxury apartment building with 6 additional floors added onto its height. That required scrupulous planning to calculate the changing loads. Lighter voided slabs were used for the new floors, while the existing structural beams and columns were strengthened throughout the building. Crews also created transfer structures to distribute new loads into the older frame very carefully. And because apartments are generally lighter than offices, they could factor in a weight reduction for the overall structure, meaning they could get more out of the older frame. It's proof that conversions like this are definitely doable, but come with considerable complexity.
So what the hell happened here? How did 235 East 42nd Street get into such a mess?
Early on July 7, 2026, construction workers discovered that a steel column on the 21st floor had buckled. The fire department was called around 8 AM, and it found a number of sagging floors, cracks, and 2 buckling columns. In response, workers on the site were evacuated, followed by a full-scale evacuation of 9 nearby buildings, including a school. The area was cordoned off as a frozen zone was imposed, and New York City's mayor announced the structural issues to the public.
2 structural columns have buckled, in addition to multiple cracks and sagging floors. The building remains unstable. We have witnessed additional movement in one of the compromised columns.
Later on Tuesday morning, officials confirmed the damage was located to a specific section of the development, not the entire building. Now, the firm GACE created the building's engineering plan, and it was quick to point out what it believed was the main cause. As reported by The Gothamist, GACE's principal, Chris Behan, moved to blame the trouble on a lack of reinforcement from the 19th floor to the top of the 21st floor. Earlier reporting by The Gothamist showed GACE's plans did actually call for reinforcement along the 2 columns that eventually buckled. Meanwhile, developer Nathan Berman seemed to agree. In an interview on the day of the incident, he claimed the issue may have occurred on the 21st floor due to additional stress caused by the weight from the 22nd level upwards. That was part of a widening of the top 15 floors. Berman went on to say the buckling columns may not have been reinforced properly, while the city's Department of Buildings said the structure's steel columns would need to be reinforced.
Simply put, they were overloaded. They buckled in on themselves. That's how steel columns, and indeed reinforced concrete, any column really, fails typically. They buckle in on themselves. In order to prevent that from happening, if I were to wrap my fingers around with a bit of tube, like a toilet paper tube, they would resist that force from buckling. So this is what they actually wanted to do.
And while a criminal investigation is still ongoing, this gives us some idea as to what may have happened. The New York City Department of Buildings is responsible for making sure that codes are met and that building projects are safe. So, as you can imagine, it's going to be a major player in this investigation. The Gothamist highlighted a complaint note that was posted and then deleted by the NYC Department of Buildings, which reportedly said the failure to provide steel reinforcement as per approved plans led to the cause of the incident. The following week, the Gothamist claims that the press secretary of the Department of Buildings, Andrew Radansky, said the note was posted by a staff member, but that it wasn't accurate, so it was corrected the same day. However, it would seem to align with the views of GACE and the developer. As for the columns themselves, they were reinforced with temporary shoring to provide stability and make it safe for assessments to be made.
In this particular instance, I do notice that where the columns are buckled, the structures actually cantilevers over sails. So you've got the column here and it sort of over sails like this. So it's making it even worse. They actually applied a significant load on those particular columns. I suspect that is why those two actually buckled rather than the others, because the other columns would have been affected by this as well. So you look at the actual buckled columns, and if they've buckled, where's the rest of the load gone there? Because clearly it's still standing, but where's it gone? That's a very loaded question, pun intended.
As you can see now, the roads are open again and life here is pretty much continuing as normal. But it doesn't mean it's the end of a story.
For the time being, while we wait on the findings of the investigation, we're working off of fire department reports, deleted notes from the Department of Buildings, and reactionary comments from the developer and project engineers. Columns buckled, and at least for now, there are claims that they were never properly reinforced. If that's the case, then it's a major oversight. But ultimately the kind of thing that's better to have been discovered at this point than when the building was fully occupied. The compromised section of the development faces a rebuild, and depending on what's discovered, there could be a need to adapt the structural system. For the time being, Berman says this is unlikely to be a full demolition job. As Chris said, we'll have to wait and see where that load moved after the columns buckled. We approached Metroloft for comment, but at the time of publishing this video, we hadn't heard back from them. It's a nervous period for Berman, who suggested this incident would probably only cost a few extra weeks. When you consider the ongoing investigation and the amount of redevelopment work that it would appear is required, that sounds pretty ambitious. Cranes reported back in 2024 that lease signings could begin in 2026 with move-ins from 2027. And so it's worth remembering a developer is beholden to investors and apartment pre-sales. There are wider implications too. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that lenders and investors in the US are now rethinking projects like this. It turns out this isn't the first time 235 has come in for criticism. Reports show it had already faced 44 prior complaints against it, ranging from falling debris to a worker blowing material off the roof with a leaf blower. Although emergency services at the time said they found no evidence to suggest that was true. What happened at 235 led to safety reviews of a number of office-to-apartment conversions across 5 boroughs. 3 buildings faced stop work orders or partial work pauses because of problems ranging from cracking beams to site safety issues and missing paperwork.
It's too early to say what the long-term consequences of this New York saga will be, but we're going to keep you guys up to date as we get more news and as the investigation moves forward. But in the meantime, I think what this really shows for me is just how much we take the construction industry for granted. Billions of us all around the world use millions of buildings every day without any incidents. There are projects like this happening all around the world every day where nothing's going wrong and no one ever hears about them. The fact that one ordinary building can go to becoming world news because of an incident like this shows just how rare these incidents are, and actually what a great job construction does most of the time of shaping our world and protecting each of us every time we go into a building. For me, taking a very glass half full approach, this episode, even though it's terrible, kind of shows how lucky we are. This video was sponsored by Rayon Design. Don't forget that you can try out Rayon Design for yourself free of charge by scanning the QR code on screen or clicking the link below. It massively helps us out here when you guys take the time to go and check out our video sponsors, so please do go and check out Rayon, we would really appreciate it. And as always guys, if you enjoyed this video and you want to get more from the definitive video channel for construction, make sure you're subscribed to the B1M.